Good afternoon, everybody. Just want to jump on real fast. A lot going on. Welcome to the Hoot Hoot KSU podcast. However, I'm not going to spend much time on KSU today because we got plenty of time for that, for KSU football and everything going on over at that program, looking at who's come in through the portal, recruits, etc. So we'll kind of break that down a little bit. I do want to respond sort of to what's going on in college football. You know, when I first did the podcast the other day, I was talking about I've been a lifelong fan. I mean, going further in depth, I would say 88 is when I really started kind of paying attention because I knew what was going on with the sport a little bit more, followed my team, and really paid attention week in, week out. You know, fast forward 40 years almost. And the sport's obviously changed. I'm not sure it changed for the better. I'm all about players getting paid, but I just think that the new system is just out of hand. They definitely need to get a handle on it a little bit. And I think it relates directly to Kennesaw State and other smaller schools coming up who can't compete with the same alumni base as some of these massive universities that's been playing football for hundreds of years. So that's all things to come. I bring that up because I watch these playoff games and these bowl games, and it's just not what it once was. And I mean, maybe I sound like the old man about get off my yard, but it's just not the same. The Cam Ward situation the other day with the Citrus Bowl or the Pop-Tart Bowl, whatever, which was wild, by the way. I've never seen that before. Someone coming in, getting a record for touchdowns. Congratulations to that kid, I guess. But then sitting out the second half once the record was achieved. I'd be curious to see if he didn't get the record in the first half, would he have continued playing until he got the record and then pulled himself out? But again, that's a selfish act. That's something you're not doing for your team. That's more of a selfish act. However, you know, why is it selfish? Well, what loyalty does Cam Ward have to Miami? He came over for 1 year, made, you know, a couple $1 million to do it. Didn't win the ACC, didn't play in the playoffs, ended up in the Pop-Tart Bowl, you know? And so I know he's looking at the next level. It looks like it's a first-round pick in the NFL draft coming up in the spring. So I get the business decision. I just don't understand why you play in the first place. And if it is solely to break that record, well, then that shows kind of a selfishness to you, and I think that'll hurt him. I think that'll hurt him with teams, and you know, we'll see. That's one perspective. Obviously, that's just my opinion. There's obviously other ones out there, but it just goes to the larger issues with the sport and the rental players for a year and what it's kind of become. Looking at the playoffs specifically, the Texas game, I mean, again, I hate it. I hate that it would come down to something like targeting. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe targeting is called. Arizona State tries a field goal, misses it, goes to overtime anyways, and Texas wins. That's a possibility, but I just don't understand the inconsistencies with that rule specifically. And if that same play happened in a random game, you know, in September, is targeting called? Probably. I mean, probably it is. It just so happens that it's a big program and a big moment, and they didn't want to ruin it based on a call. That's all it comes down to. And, you know, I try not to be too much conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but with ESPN's marriage to the SEC, I just don't know how you don't start putting things together a little bit with that. Just Herb Street and his awful take with Indiana had no business being in the playoffs because they got blown out when they played Notre Dame, because Alabama should have been in. Okay, we'll go see what Alabama did against Michigan here just recently, a team that Indiana had beaten. And, you know, why did that team have to be in there? What's South Carolina do against Illinois? I mean, nothing. So they lost that game. So I'm just so confused with this look at what the sport is, and if a blowout happens in a playoff game, how that team is not deserving on being there. I don't get that. I've been watching sports, all sorts of sports for a long time. Blowouts happen all the time in the playoffs. I mean, how many crappy Super Bowls have I watched in my life? A lot, by the way. They've been just terrible. Not even games. Complete blowouts in the first half, it's over. It happens. It doesn't mean that the team that got there didn't deserve to get there because of who they beat, because of who they played, what their record was, etc. I have no issues with the 12 teams that were selected. I really don't. I think SMU is the weakest of the ones that went, but at the same time, if SMU doesn't go and they leave them out, then what's the point of a conference championship game? You know, if I think the coach from SMU said that perfectly. He said that if we all get COVID and we don't play the game, we're in. So how in the world can we not get in if we play the game and we lose? He's right. You know, if they didn't bring SMU in, that game, I mean, that whole idea of a conference championship doesn't exist. So, you know, it's just hard to watch right now. It's just there's a lot going on, and everybody's got their own perspectives, and I think it's a lot of network based and ratings based, and I struggle with that. Obviously, it's been a cash cow for a long time, but it doesn't have the infrastructure of the NFL game. And they need to get a handle of this. If you're going to make it the semi-pros, the minor leagues of the NFL, do it, but use the NFL as the model at least, because they do it well. The NFL does a great job with the product that they produce. They know what they're doing. They've had time to play with it and figure out what's best. I just don't think that the sport can continue on this path. Get away from the non-business aspect of it for a minute. You know, Arizona State, I hate it. I really do. They really, honestly, stop 4th and 13. That's it. Don't give up a touchdown there. Play some defense. Game over. You know, the targeting doesn't even matter anymore. It sucks that that's going to be a talking point, but, you know, stop them on 4th and 13. Be better on defense in that play. Don't blitz everybody. Leave people back in the coverage. Obviously, they had 13 yards to get the first down, and that dude was wide open. I mean, just wide open. Wasn't even going to be an issue there with that touchdown. Ohio State looks awesome. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I always thought this year that we just didn't know. And when I watched that Oregon game originally at Oregon, you know, both those teams were really good. I thought it was a weird way that ended. But Ohio State, I mean, just looks like a juggernaut as I kind of expected them to be this year. Just haven't seen it until late in the year. And what happens in every sport? Who gets hot at the end? That's the team to watch out for. That's the dangerous team. Ohio State is that team. Ohio State looks like the class of all the teams I've seen play. Everybody else has some kind of an issue. Where Ohio State looks very complete, and that defense is the real deal. So we'll see what happens in the next round with Texas. I'd pick Ohio State right now. I'd pick Ohio State to win the whole thing. Do you have a playoff game coming up today after the horrible events that took place in New Orleans? The Sugar Bowl will be today at 4 o'clock. Right now it's 1:25. I think Notre Dame wins that game. I mean, I think Georgia is a more talented team, but, you know, everybody's talking about how great this freshman quarterback is, but there's a lot of pressure with being a freshman quarterback in that game against Notre Dame's defense, who's pretty good. I know there's a lot of injuries on defense right now for Notre Dame, but, you know, you got a senior quarterback on Notre Dame's side versus a true freshman in that environment. I've seen true freshmen enough in my life to very rarely, you know, are they able to step up in those big games. It does happen, but just not very often. But, you know, there's other players on the field as well. If Georgia can run the ball, they've got some good running backs, absolutely they can win the game. Their defense is awesome. Their defense can win the game for them. But we'll just see if, but like I said, if I was just picking just straight up, forget spreads for right now, I would say Notre Dame. That's who I would go with, which creates a Notre Dame-Penn State matchup. You know, that's actually probably a pretty even game. I don't know who I like in that game yet. I'll have to think about it and see what injuries are. But let's also see who plays Penn State, because it could be Georgia. If it's Georgia, Penn State, and this kid's the real deal, this freshman, then yeah, I mean, I pick Georgia to go all the way and play Ohio State in the championship game. But right now, I'm going to say Ohio State beats Texas, and I'll get back to you on the other matchups. Let's see what happens today, but I am going to go with Notre Dame today. Don't bet on this. Don't not financial advice, right? That's the line you always see. Just my gut feeling, just from watching college football in the past. And we'll see what happens. But, you know, I'm just kind of over the SEC a little bit. I just think that it's being shown that if you play the same teams in this conference and you tell me that all these teams you're playing are really good and they're all ranked and you win, you lose, it pumps your schedule up, right? But what if they're not that good? What if the rankings are based on reputation more than ability, or kind of where the teams actually are from a skills perspective or from a talent perspective? That's been my issue with the SEC all along, is it's just kind of shoved in your face a little bit as this the end-all be-all conference. But I think if anything, this playoff begins to show you is that there are other conferences out there and there are good teams nationwide. I think that the SEC is no better than what I've seen from the Big Ten. I mean, I think the Big Ten may be a deeper conference this year. And I'm talking about this year. I'm not talking about historically, even though I do believe that there is something to be said with kind of the shell game that is the SEC sometimes, is these teams that are ranked in the low teens or the 20s go on to have losing seasons that aren't that great. I mean, Kentucky was ranked earlier this year. Arkansas was ranked earlier this year. These aren't great teams. I just don't get it a lot of times. It's more or less what we're supposed to think. But when we actually see the games taking place, your opinion changes. I mean, like I said, Bama looked terrible the other day. South Carolina did not look good. And yes, I'm sure there's players that have opted out. I get all that from both sides. But it just gets old in Kiffin's picks to, joking about Indiana a few weeks ago when they got beaten by Notre Dame. But no one comments on Tennessee and what happened in Tennessee and Ohio State. They went on the road to Columbus and got their doors blown off by a superior team. And that's okay to say. That happens. It happens in games all the time. Doesn't mean Tennessee's a bad team or is lacks talent. It just means that going to Columbus in December to play a talented team and you lost, yeah, that's what favorites are supposed to do. But why wouldn't you mention that? Why would you only focus on Indiana losing to Notre Dame but not focus on the Tennessee losing to Ohio State? It doesn't make sense unless there's bias involved, and it just gets hard to watch a little bit. Listen to Herb Street the other day when Ohio State was playing Tennessee was just something else. That guy's just lost it somewhere along the way. Just watch football, give us your opinion, that's fine, but you don't have to put down a team for going 11-1 with the schedule that they were given and being able to get into a playoff. It's a great story. I mean, how often does Alabama go to the playoffs? Every year, it feels like. And they didn't deserve to be there this year, and it showed in the bowl game against Michigan. Yet, Indiana, who you don't hear anything from ever, goes 11-1 on the schedule that was given to them. They didn't make the schedule. Sure, why not give them a chance? Why not give Arizona State the chance? I mean, look how good that team played the other day against one of the Blue Bloods and one of the favorites to win the whole thing. And they should have won. Yeah, I don't know. We complained about there not being enough teams, and we always made the excuse that once we went to 8 teams, when it was originally 8 teams, it'd be like, there'd be no excuse for the 9th best team. We go to 12, and we're like, there's no excuse for the 13th best team, and there really isn't. You get 12 teams in, I don't want to hear any excuses about number 13. Don't get your doors blown off against Oklahoma, at Oklahoma, who Oklahoma clearly is not a great team. I'm talking about Alabama, by the way. Ole Miss is the same thing, losing to Kentucky, losing to Florida. I mean, you lost the games. Don't tell me that those teams are great when they weren't great. One of those teams didn't even make a bowl game. And yet, we're supposed to believe that just because it's in this conference that it just means more. It doesn't. It's just football. There's good days, there's bad days, and the team that's the most consistent, who wins the most often, should be rewarded for doing that. And when it's an open playoff like it is right now, then it's going to work itself out. The better teams are going to win most times. I mean, back in the day, when you didn't even get 1 versus number 2, and then we got 1 versus number 2. Sometimes those were good games, sometimes those were terrible games. 12 teams, though, there's no doubt. There's no doubt it's a better system. That's awesome to have that, in that the playoffs will be exciting, but just the games aren't going to always be great, and that's all right. They're going to go to 14 like in 2 years, and then they'll go to 16. And then, I mean, it's fine to continue to do this, but I don't care about number 7, the 17th best team, and that why they feel like they should get in, but they didn't, or honestly the 13th best team this year, which is Alabama, then South Carolina, then Ole Miss. I don't care about those teams because they lost. They each lost games they should not have lost to teams that were not that good. And just because they were in the SEC doesn't mean they get a free pass. It doesn't work like that. So that's it. That's it. That was my thoughts of what's going on in college football. To bring it home with Kennesaw State, again, we have a defensive coordinator now. Offense is in place. The dead period's taking place with recruiting. So we'll recap all those things, kind of see what we have. Coach Bohannon's players, a lot of them have kind of stepped out now. And we're going to see what we have. And we'll keep you covered right here on the Hoot Hoot KSU podcast as often as I can. But I just want to jump on real fast and kind of give you my feelings just in general with college football right now as we move forward. And I'll talk to you in the next week, and I'll give you an update with recruiting and all that stuff and kind of how things are turning out. Thanks. Talk to you soon. Bye.